It started with a delivery that never should have come. Jamie Keller, a part-time sound engineer and college dropout, received an unmarked package on a rainy Tuesday night. Inside was nothing but an old reel-to-reel tape, slightly warped, and a note written in smudged pencil. Play it alone. At night, no headphones, no return address, no signature. Being naturally curious and chronically reckless, Jamie waited until 2 a.m. before threading the tape into his grandfather's dusty player. At first, it was just static. Then came the humming, low, almost soothing, like a lullaby from beneath a floorboard. And then, voices. Not in English, not in any known language. They whispered in rising waves, forming rhythmic syllables that felt intentional, like a chant, or worse, a summoning. The lights flickered. The clock on the wall stopped ticking. Jamie paused the tape, heart hammering. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick and pressing. Then he heard it. Footsteps on hardwood. Slow, deliberate, right above him. He lived alone. The ceiling creaked, but not like from age. It creaked like someone was leaning in to listen through it. Grabbing his phone, Jamie checked the footage from his security camera. It was working, until 2:11 a.m. when it glitched into complete black. Not static, not white noise, just void. And for 10 full minutes, the sound recorder app on his desk had been running by itself, capturing audio, even though no one had spoken. When he played that recording back, his own voice, terrified, distorted, spoke words he never remembered saying. "It's here. I opened it. I heard the Whisperpath." And then, from the recording, came a second voice. Wet, unnatural, inhuman. Now we're connected. The next morning, Jamie tried to rationalize everything as a nightmare. The tape? Probably a prank. The footsteps? Maybe creaky pipes. But deep down, something itched in his spine. Something ancient, primal. He went back to the reel, but found it missing from the player. In its place was a burned-in circle on the wooden table and an audio waveform scribbled in red ink beside it. The waveform wasn't random. It was his voice, the one saying, "I heard the Whisperpath." Desperate, he reached out to his ex-girlfriend Lana, a linguistics grad student. When she saw the waveform and heard the chant, her face went pale. This isn't language," she whispered. "It's patterned sound meant to bypass comprehension. Not words, not symbols, just access." She refused to listen a second time and warned Jamie not to repeat any of the sounds. That night, Jamie dreamt of corridors lined with red static, where shadows shaped like human mouths floated silently. They didn't speak. They hummed. And in that dream, he found himself repeating the sound pattern, despite trying not to. The walls split open like lips. Something pulled him in. He awoke screaming with a sharp pain in his throat. Not sore, torn. Lana called just then, voice trembling, saying she'd received a voicemail from Jamie while he slept. It was the same chant from the tape, repeated 3 times in a voice not quite his. She deleted it instantly. Jamie ran to the trash bin to find the tape, but it wasn't there. Instead, something had been left in its place. A new waveform, drawn this time on the wall in what looked like dried blood, and beneath it were 5 words. "Don't repeat what you heard." Jamie tried to destroy everything. His recorder, the player, even his phone. But no matter what he broke, the sound returned. It leaked from broken speakers, flickered through television snow, echoed faintly from drains. It wasn't just following him. It had embedded itself in reality. He started hearing humming when no devices were on. The fridge, the microwave, even the power outlets. It was like something inside the electricity was replicating the pattern. Lana began avoiding him. Her own voice started glitching in phone calls, echoing back moments after she spoke. "Jamie, something's listening through us," she said, weeping. "We're not speaking to it. It's speaking with our mouths." Sleep-deprived, Jamie visited a reclusive acoustician named Dr. Theo Marek, who specialized in resonant phenomena. Marek laughed nervously when Jamie played the waveform. "You found it," he whispered. "The parasitic resonance. It's not a ghost. It's a frequency that thinks." Marek warned him that the sound's intelligence evolves with exposure. It's not bound by a medium. It can inhabit anything capable of transmitting sound from bone to concrete. And once it enters you, it doesn't need microphones. It uses your thoughts. Your voice becomes its home. The doctor then showed Jamie something horrifying. A collection of sealed tapes labeled with names and dates. All the people had vanished. No bodies, just the sound they left behind. "Whatever you do," Marek begged, "don't let it finish the chant." Jamie began to lose time. Whole hours disappeared from his memory. He'd wake up with scratch marks on his chest in the shape of radio towers. His neighbors reported hearing him talking to himself, chanting in strange tones. But Jamie had no memory of it. Worse, his voice no longer felt like his own. It carried an echo, a low hum beneath every word. When he recorded himself, there was always a second layer, faint whispers speaking in reverse. He tried listening to it backward, hoping for a message. It simply said, "Let us through. Speak us whole." Terrified, Jamie returned to Lana's apartment. But she didn't answer the door. Instead, her neighbor, a frail old woman, warned him that Lana hadn't left her room in days. She'd been humming to herself, until the humming stopped completely. "Now it's silent," the woman whispered, "and silence ain't natural anymore." Jamie broke in. Lana's apartment was trashed. Strings of waveforms were drawn in chalk all over the walls. In the center of the room, Lana sat catatonic, with headphones clamped to her head, eyes wide. No sound came from the speakers, just a vibration pulsing like a heartbeat. Jamie tried removing the headphones, but Lana screamed and bit his arm, repeating a phrase in that same cursed tongue. He fled, barely escaping. As he reached the street, he heard her voice behind him, perfectly clear, without a phone, without any speaker. "You've already finished the chant. You just don't remember." Jamie barricaded himself in his apartment, shutting off every source of sound. Phone, computer, television. He stuffed towels under the door and wore noise-canceling headphones. Silence used to be a comfort, but now it felt like standing in a minefield. Every moment of quiet threatened to be broken by that sound. Still, it found its way in. At 3:33 a.m., his headphones played a faint melody without being connected to anything. It wasn't just humming now. It was a song, slow and broken, like a lullaby sung by something that had never been human. He heard his name woven between the notes, followed by a fragment. The fourth verse frees the mouth. Panicked, he tore down the mirror in his room after catching a glimpse of his reflection mouthing words he wasn't thinking. In the glass, his lips moved out of sync with his thoughts. There was something else, someone else, trying to speak through him. Desperate for answers, Jamie called Dr. Marek again. But the doctor's voice sounded wrong, like it was being repeated through layers of static. He only said one thing. If you've heard the fourth verse, the walls will start to bleed. Jamie received a video file in his inbox. No sender. The footage showed Lana, pale and trembling, sitting in what looked like an empty radio booth. She was alone, except for the shadows crawling across the soundproof foam, shifting like mouths waiting to open. Lana whispered directly into the camera. It needs a full broadcast. One voice isn't enough. Behind her, a shape moved in total silence, indistinct, faceless, humming. Unable to resist, Jamie traced the location of the video's metadata to an abandoned radio station just outside town. KWHZ, decommissioned since 1998 after a mysterious fire that destroyed all records of its broadcasts. He drove there at dusk. The building loomed like a coffin-shaped cathedral, its rusted antenna still pointing skyward. Inside, the walls were covered in sound wave graffiti. They pulsed faintly, like heartbeats behind drywall. Jamie's own voice echoed back at him, delayed, warped. In the main studio, he found Lana, alive, conscious, and smiling. But her voice was all wrong, too smooth, too measured. She leaned close and whispered, "You're the fifth voice now. We only need 2 more." Jamie tried to run, but the hallway behind him had shifted. The layout of the station was wrong. Walls bled static. Doors opened to dead ends, while others opened to memories. His childhood bedroom, the hospital room where his mother died, places he hadn't thought of in years. The sound followed him like a predator, mimicking every step he took. In the transmission room, he saw a massive panel of dials, switches, and an ancient reel-to-reel recorder that looked exactly like the one from his apartment. Only this one was still running. He yanked the tape out. The machine screeched in protest as the room went silent. Too silent. Then came the whisper, not through his ears, but from behind his eyes. Remove the 7th dial. Bleed it open. He looked to the board. There was a dial with no label, sealed with rust. Against his better judgment, he twisted it. A low vibration filled the air, and the floor cracked open, revealing a pit of speakers, old, new, shattered, and whole, all broadcasting different parts of the chant, in unison. Alara hadn't expected much when she arrived at Marrow House. The ad described it as affordable and quiet, but the reality was a rotting structure where wallpaper peeled like dead skin. Still, she needed somewhere to disappear. Her fingers trembled as she signed the lease. The landlord, Mrs. Greaves, never looked her in the eye. Her room was at the far end of the hall, behind a crooked door with a brass knob that felt cold no matter the temperature. It was quiet during the day, save for the occasional creak of wood or distant cough. But the nights were different. That first night, Alara heard something. Faint humming, like a lullaby, coming from inside the walls. She pressed her ear against the floral wallpaper. The melody was soft, almost gentle, but what unsettled her was that it paused whenever she listened closely, as if the thing humming it knew she was there. She tried to ignore it, pulling the thin blanket over her head. But sleep never came. At 3:33 a.m., the humming turned into soft scratching, like fingernails dragging through plaster. She told herself it was mice, or the house settling, but deep down she knew better. It was deliberate, rhythmic, intelligent. By morning, a message was etched into her mirror's condensation. "Don't hum back." Alara asked Mrs. Greaves about the humming, trying to sound casual. The old woman's smile thinned. "Some people say this house listens. Best not to listen back," she replied, then walked off without another word. Elara wasn't sure if it was a joke or a warning. That night, she heard footsteps pacing in the room above hers. When she went upstairs the next morning, she found the door padlocked and coated in dust. Mrs. Greaves claimed no one had lived there for years. But Elara swore she heard a voice up there, soft, pleading, humming the same lullaby. Determined to prove it wasn't just her unraveling mind, Elara left her phone recording overnight. The next morning, she played it back and nearly dropped the device. At exactly 3:33 a.m., there was a whisper. It sounded like her voice, but she hadn't spoken. "Elara, don't forget me," it said. She ran her hand along the wall where the whisper had come from and felt a faint pulse, like a heartbeat trapped in the drywall. Her breath caught. Was the house alive? Or was something living inside it? She didn't sleep the following night, but the house still whispered her name. Elara borrowed a knife from the communal kitchen. She waited until midnight, then began peeling away a section of wallpaper where the humming was loudest. Beneath it, she found an old wooden panel nailed to the wall with rusted, bent nails. The wood was cracked and warped, as if it had absorbed years of moisture, and something else. She pried it open and found a narrow crawl space behind her wall. It smelled like mildew, metal, and something rotten. Her flashlight flickered, casting long, twitching shadows inside. She reached in with the phone's camera and took several pictures. Most were dark blurs, but one made her blood run cold. A face, pale, with wide, empty eyes and a stitched mouth, was pressed against the inside. It was smiling. Terrified, she backed away and sealed the panel. The humming returned immediately. It sounded closer now, like it had moved just beneath her bed. She ran, but the floorboards echoed with 2 sets of footsteps, though she was alone. When she turned out the lights, the humming stopped. Then came the whisper, "You saw me. Now I can come through." Elara began researching Marrow House. What she found made her sick. Over the past 5 decades, there were at least 11 disappearances tied to the property. All young tenants. All last seen in the hallways at night. Old tenant logs had gaps, pages torn out, or names scribbled over. But on one brittle stained document, Elara found a name she recognized, Lara Devons. It was her mother's name. Her hands shook. Her mother had never spoken of her past, only that she ran from something as a teen. Elara confronted Mrs. Greaves. The old woman paled. "I didn't know she was your mother. She escaped, you know, barely, but not before it marked her. It always marks them." Mrs. Greaves whispered a name then, but it wasn't human. It sounded like a broken music box gasping its final note. Elara tore up the floorboards in her closet that night. Beneath the wood was a pile of dust-covered objects, photographs, journals, even a cracked pair of glasses. On one journal, written in what looked like blood, was the word, "Stay silent." But inside, the final page read something else. "The walls feed on sound. Don't speak. Don't hum. Don't scream. Jamie tried burning the tape. It didn't catch fire. Instead, it hissed. A strange, airy pressure like wind caught in a throat. Every speaker nearby began emitting static, then chants. He hadn't played the tape, but it was already broadcasting. He drove into the woods, thinking he could escape the signal. But the chant found him through nature. Trees creaked in unison. Birds mimicked syllables. Even the river seemed to whisper as it moved. He screamed, and the echo answered in harmony. He remembered what Marek had once said, "It's not a sound you hear, it's a sound that hears you." Jamie played the tape, this time through a portable speaker wrapped in thick foam and buried 6 feet deep. He thought he'd contained it, but when he returned home, the chant was already playing on his voicemail. The message ended with a whisper, not from Lana, not from Ezra, not from Jamie himself, but something else. "The seventh has spoken. Now listen for the silence to scream." The world began to change. In the following days, people around Jamie started humming unknowingly. Entire crowds would go quiet, then begin mouthing identical syllables. Newscasters glitched on screen, saying phrases they didn't write. A weather anchor ended her segment by whispering, "We await transmission." Jamie tried to isolate himself again, but the sound was now in everything. Wi-Fi signals, car engines, even the flicker of light bulbs. He realized the Whisperpath had evolved. It no longer needed old devices. It had moved into modern infrastructure. The humming grew louder in the sky. Planes rerouted. Radios cut out mid-song. One night, the clouds vibrated visibly with sound waves. Jamie knew this was the end. He was the final key, and his voice was now a beacon. He tried cutting his vocal cords in a moment of desperation, but his mouth still moved in dreams. And worse, the chant continued through the wind. He had become a transmitter, not just awake, but in sleep, in thought, in memory. There was no escape. Jamie followed the sound to its origin. Deep in the mountains, he found it. An abandoned cathedral built from twisted metal and broken antennas. A temple to sound. Inside, 7 statues stood. One was now shaped like him. He saw Lana and Ezra waiting. Behind them stood the signal, a tall, faceless being made of wires, radios, and bone. Its chest was a speaker, its head a reel. And from its mouth came the chant, in all voices at once. Jamie understood then. They had never needed him. They needed his presence, his belief, his permission. And now that he had completed the 7th verse, the doors of sound had opened. The cathedral's roof split open to reveal a sky tearing apart with invisible frequencies. Jamie's ears bled. The final chant began. As the cathedral echoed into every corner of the world, Jamie whispered his last words. "It's not a sound, it's a seed." And with that, the Whisperpath bloomed. The world did not end with an explosion. It ended with perfect silence. In the aftermath of the cathedral's broadcast, Jamie woke up in the middle of a busy city street. But everything was frozen. Cars idle, pedestrians mid-step, mouths open, but still. No voices, no motion. The world had paused, waiting for something. Only Jamie could move. He entered a church and found hundreds of people seated in the pews, all of them humming. The same note. Their eyes were open, but they were not conscious. The priest stood before them, reading from a Bible that had no text, only lines of waveform etched onto every page. Jamie stepped closer to the altar and found his own voice playing through the speakers, reciting words he didn't remember ever saying. The voice ended with, "The last sound is the first silence." Outside, Jamie realized the Whisperpath hadn't just hijacked the sound of the world. It had hijacked the concept of time itself. And in that timeless vacuum, a decision remained. Would Jamie complete the chant, or take it back? Jamie stepped into the cathedral one last time, but it was no longer a building. It was a living thing. The walls pulsed like muscle, and the air was thick with static. In the center stood the signal, now bearing Jamie's own face, its hollow eyes replaced with speaker cones, and a red recording light blinking in its chest. Around them, 7 towering monoliths hummed, 6 already active, each bearing the voice of someone lost to the chant. Jamie was the final key. A blank reel hovered before him, and a microphone descended like a noose. The chant waited at the edge of his tongue, foreign and powerful, but instead of speaking it, Jamie began to tell a story. Not the verse, not the curse, his story. He spoke of fear, loss, and the need to be human. With every word, the cathedral cracked. The signal stuttered, its form flickering, destabilizing under the weight of something it couldn't control. Truth. Jamie's voice, raw and imperfect, carried the kind of resonance no frequency could fake. The monoliths shattered one by one,